Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and we are back with more Southern horrors and other writings. Today, we are getting into part 2, the documents. And lynch law in all its phases. And we'll go ahead and start with the preface here. The greater part of what is contained in these pages was published in the New York Age on June the 25th, 1892, in explanation of the editorial which the Memphis whites considered sufficiently infamous to justify the destruction of the paper, the Free Speech. Since the appearance of that statement, requests have come from all parts of the country that exiled a name under which it then appeared be issued a pamphlet in pamphlet form. Some donations were made, but not enough for that purpose. A noble effort of the ladies of New York and Brooklyn on October the 5th have enabled me to comply with this request and give the world a true, unvarnished account of all the causes of lynch law in the South. This statement is not a shield for the despoiler of virtue, nor altogether a defense for the poor, blind Afro-American Samsons who suffer themselves to be betrayed by white Delilahs. It is a contribution to truth, an array of facts, the perusal of which it is hoped will stimulate this great American republic to demand that justice be done though the heavens fall. It is with no pleasure I have dipped my hands into the corruption here exposed. Somebody must show that the Afro-American race is more sinned against than sinning, and it seems to have fallen upon me to do so. The awful death toll that Judge Lynch is calling every week is appalling, not only because of the lives it takes, the rank cruelty and outrage to the victims, but because of the prejudice it fosters and the stain it places against the good name of a weak race. The Afro-American is not a bestial race. It is if this work can contribute in any way toward proving this, and at the same time arouse the conscience of the American people to a demand for justice to every citizen and punishment by law for the lawless, I shall feel I have done my race a service. New York City, October 26th, 1892. Ida B. Wells. Honorable Fred Douglass's letter. Dear Miss Wells, let me give you thanks for your faithful paper on the lynch abomination now generally practiced against colored people in the South. There has been no word equal to it in convincing power. I have spoken, but my word is feeble in comparison. You give us what you know and testify from actual knowledge. You have dealt with the facts with cool, painstaking fidelity and left those naked and contradicted facts to speak for themselves. Brave woman, you have done your people and mine a service which can neither be weighed nor measured. If American conscience were only half alive, if the American church and clergy were only half Christianized, if American moral sensibility were not hardened by persistent infliction of outrage and crime against colored people, a scream of horror, shame, and indignation would rise to heaven wherever your pamphlet shall be read. But alas, even crime has power to reproduce itself and create conditions favorable to its own existence. It sometimes seems we are deserted by earth and heaven. Yet we must still think, speak, and work, and trust in the power of a merciful God for final deliverance. Yours truly and gratefully, or very truly and gratefully yours, Frederick Douglass. Cedar Hill, Anacostia, D.C., October 25th, 1892. Chapter 1, The Offense, or Offense. Wednesday evening, May the 24th, 1892. The city of Memphis was filled with excitement. Editorials in the daily papers of that date caused a meeting to be held in the Cotton Exchange building. A committee was sent for the editors of the Free Speech, an African American journal published in that city, and the only reason the open threats of lynching that were made were not carried out was because they could not be found. The cause of this commotion was the following editorial published in the Free Speech on May the 21st, 1892. The Saturday previous. 8 Negroes lynched since the last issue of the Free Speech, one at Little Rock, Arkansas, last Saturday morning, where the citizens broke into the penitentiary and got their man, 3 near Anniston, Alabama, 1 near New Orleans, and 3 at Clarksville, Georgia, the last 3 for killing a white man, and 5 on the same old racket. The new alarm about raping white women. The same program of hanging, then shooting bullets into the lifeless bodies was carried out to the letter. Nobody in the reaction of the country believes the old threadbare lie that the Negro men rape white women. If Southern white men are not careful, they will overreach themselves and public sentiment will have a reaction. A conclusion will then be reached which will be very damaging to the moral reputation of their women. The Daily Commercial of Wednesday morning, May the 25th, contained the following leader. Those Negroes who are attempting to make the lynching of individuals of their race a means for arousing the worst passions of their kind are playing with a dangerous sentiment. The Negroes may as well understand that there is no mercy for the Negro rapist and little patience with his defenders. A Negro organ printed in this city in the recent issue publishes the following atrocious paragraph. Nobody in this section of the country believes the old threadbare lie that Negro men rape white women. If Southern white men are not careful, they will overreach themselves and public sentiment will have a reaction and a conclusion will be reached, which will be very damaging to the moral reputation of their women. The fact that a black scoundrel was allowed to live and utter such loathsome and repulsive calumnies is a volume of evidence as to the wonderful patience of Southern whites. but we have had enough of it. There are some things that the Southern white man will not tolerate, and the obscene intimations of the foregoing have brought the writer to the very outermost limit of public patience. We hope we have said enough. The Evening Scimitar of the same date copied the commercial's editorial with these words of comment. Patience under the circumstances is not a virtue. If the Negroes themselves do not apply the remedy without delay, it will be the duty of those whom he has attacked to tie the wretch who utters these calumnies to a stake at the intersection of Main and Madison streets, brand him in the forehead with a hot iron, and perform him upon a surgical operation with a pair of tailor's shears. Acting upon this advice, the leading citizens met in the Cotton Exchange building in the same evening, and threats of lynching were freely indulged, not by the lawless element upon which the devilry of the South is usually saddled, but by the leading businessmen in their leading business center. Mr. Fleming, the business manager and owning a half interest in the free speech, had to leave town to escape the mob and was afterwards ordered not to return. Letters and telegrams sent to me in New York, where I was spending my vacation, advised me that bodily harm awaited my return. Creditors took possession of my office and sold the outfit, and the free speech was as if it had never been. The editorial in question was prompted by the many inhuman and fiendish teachings of Afro-Americans which have recently taken place, and was meant as a warning. 8 lynched in 1 week, and 5 of them charged with rape. The thinking public will not easily believe freedom and education more brutalizing than slavery. And the world knows that the crime of rape was unknown during the 4 years of the Civil War, when the white women of the South were at the mercy of the race which is all at once charged with being a bestial one. Since my business has been destroyed and I am an exile from home because of that editorial, the issue has been forced, and as the writer of it, I feel that the race and the public generally should have a statement of the facts as they exist. They will serve at the same time as a defense for the Afro-American Samsons who suffer themselves to be betrayed by white Delilahs. The whites of Montgomery, Alabama knew J.C. Dukes sounded the keynote of the situation, which they would gladly hide from the world, and he said in his paper, The Herald, 5 years ago, "Why is it that white women attract Negro men now more than in former days? There was a time when such a thing was unheard of. There is a secret to this thing, and we greatly suspect it is the growing appreciation of white Juliets for colored Romeos." Mr. Duke, like the free speech proprietors, was forced to leave the city for reflecting on the Hana of white women, or Anna, I guess, and his paper suppressed. But the truth remains that Afro-American men do not always rape white women without their consent. Mr. Duke, before leaving Montgomery, signed a card disclaiming any intention of slandering Southern white women. The editor of the Free Speech has no disclaimer to enter, but asserts instead that there are many white women in the South who could marry colored men if such an act would not place them at once beyond the pale of society and within the clutches of the law. The miscegenation laws of the South only operate against the legitimate union of the races. They leave the white man free to seduce all the colored girls he can, but it is death to the colored man who yields to the force and advances of a similar attraction in white women. White men lynch the offending Afro-American not because he is a despoiler of virtue, but because he succumbs to the smiles of white women. So yeah. The African-American Samsons and the white Delilahs. With that we've finished, but let's go ahead and look at the footnotes here. At the bottom of the page where the preface was, they've got to the Afro-American women of New York and Brooklyn, whose race, love, earnest zeal, and unselfish effort at Lyric Hall in the city of New York on the night of October the 5th, 1892, made possible its publication. This pamphlet is greatly dedicated by the author. So that was actually written by Wells. And then on the next page, they've got a footnote. What does it deal with here? It's just saying that question marks in parentheses throughout the documents are presumably Wells. So yeah. Because at one point she asked, should this be this? Should that be that? Trying to see. Oh yeah. Free speech. 8 Negroes lynched since last issue of the Free Speech, one at Little Rock, Arkansas, last Saturday morning, where the citizens broke. So she's questioning because but it's what it's been said they did. They broke into the penitentiary. And she's questioning it. She's saying, I doubt they broke into the penitentiary. They probably just walked in because most law enforcement was on the side of the lynchers. Not so much the lynchee. But yeah. So, she really talks about the terror used against African American papers, writers, and the violent tactics and in-force tactics in mass by white hate groups to drive people out if they're of an African American origin and are speaking the facts. There's one time, where is it? I said Hannah. It was Honah. I think she was trying to say Anna, because they would talk about the Anna. Yeah, right here it is. Mr. Duke, like the free speech proprietors, was forced to leave the city for reflecting on the Anna, essentially talking, reflecting, written. The word honor is when some people use the southern slang, the Anna of white women, and his paper suppressed. So, yeah. But Wells, even though she's threatened with bodily harm if she ever arrives back in Memphis, she does not back down from putting the truth forward. And you gotta appreciate that. Now, again, I know a lot of people don't like me saying the word Negro. I know some people have a more negative view of it than others. So, I'm sorry if you feel that way. But again, I read, and if there is certain slurs or unsavory words, I'm going to keep going through and saying them. I will apologize if it is a vile word. But, yeah. Because I think true attention is needed for these. Maybe we wouldn't have been in the damn situation we're in, where Republicans and Trump have fucked over the nation, if more people were educated. But anyway, we'll go ahead and end this episode here. As always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. Thank you for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.